do the benefits of moderate drinking outweigh the risks? To find out for sure, a new $100 million government study began last January. Positive results would be celebrated by the alcohol industry. And that's where the whole project went off the rails.
5 of the largest alcohol beverage producers are funding the majority of the study. They're spending nearly $70 million in the study.
This week, so-called science under the influence of alcohol.
This morning, fallout from a monumental verdict.
In a landmark decision, chemical company Monsanto was held responsible for a terminally ill man's cancer. The case focused on a popular weed killer used by millions of Americans. Key to the case was testimony that the company polluted the science.
Was there one thing that you saw that bothered you?
What was behind the scenes in shaping the scientific viewpoint about glyphosate or Roundup?
At first glance, you're not really sure what you're even seeing. There's kind of a spongy feel to the surface when you're walking on it. Only a few inches down is where you realize what we're walking on, locals boast, is the 8th wonder of the world.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Today we focus on taxpayer-funded scientific research secretly crafted behind our backs to come up with particular results. That's the shocking allegation about a major study on moderate drinking proposed by the National Institutes of Health together with scientists from Harvard and Yale. When you hear what really went on behind the scenes, you may ask, if top scientists are doing that, what else are they doing?
There's ongoing debate over whether any benefits of drinking in moderation outweigh the known risks. To find out for sure, a new 10-year, $100 million government study began signing up test subjects last January. The Moderate Alcohol and Cardiovascular Health trial was sponsored by the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, part of the government's National Institutes of Health, NIH. If results came out right, it could mean champagne corks popping inside the alcohol industry with big dividends. Moderate drinking could even be promoted as part of a heart-healthy diet. That's where the whole project went off the rails, according to Dr. Michael Carome at the watchdog Public Citizen.
It turns out that the alcohol industry, 5 of the largest alcohol beverage producers, are funding the majority of the study. They're spending nearly $70 million in the study. And it is a direct violation of an NIH policy that prohibits such solicitation of gifts or money from industry.
NIH added 30 million tax dollars to the study, too. But we examined insider emails suggesting the whole project was secretly designed to be little more than free advertising for industries selling beer, wine, and spirits.
It seems that this study is more interested in serving as a marketing tool for the alcohol industry rather than answering important scientific questions that need to be answered and will advance the health population in the U.S.
The New York Times first exposed the controversy in 2017, prompting an investigation by NIH. Documents now made public revealed jaw-dropping coordination between government officials, scientists, and the industry that stood to benefit if the study had the right results. In 2013, government officials, whose names are redacted by NIH, raised the idea to secure funding for a study from the alcoholic beverage industry. That could give the appearance that we're soliciting funding, which we're not allowed to do, and specifically from industry, countered one official. We just flat out can't come out and say that. It's a screaming red flashing neon light. In another email, we absolutely can't look like we reached out to industry to seek funding. But that's exactly what they went on to do. First, they seemed to ignore rules against favoritism by planning a trip to Boston, home of Harvard's Dr. Kenneth Muckamall, who would later get chosen to lead the research. "I am going to Boston for a brief vacation," writes one unnamed government official. It would be entirely coincidental if I happened to spend a day with some friends who might be in the process of writing a study grant application, and if we also just happen to have some hypothetical discussions about details of such a study. Pretty soon, Dr. Muckamal is joking with his government colleagues about trying to get a contribution from an alcohol industry contact. Get your effing A moving. Sound tactful? Later, Dr. Muckamal comments, our chances with the brewers and distillers would only go up with buy-in from other sources, including wine, if we can find any. Government officials discuss connecting with Heineken, European beer people, and offering European alcohol producers our full dog and pony show. They even provide the alcohol industry with tax money, 2 small planning grants to bring together a group of experts to determine how best to structure the study.
Can you explain in simple terms why it's perceived as a conflict for the government to solicit funding from the very people that could benefit from the study?
The results of those studies end up being favorable to the interests of industry, and that's been shown again and again.
In a presentation, Dr. Muckamal told the alcohol industry, one of the important findings will be showing that moderate drinking is safe. Hints of a larger agenda are found in a pitch Dr. Muckamal and a Yale colleague, Dr. John Crystal, made, referring to evidence necessary if alcohol is to be recommended as part of a healthy diet. In the end, here's how it worked. NIH and university researchers received $67 million in funding promises from 5 alcoholic beverage giants. The money was channeled through the nonprofit Foundation for the National Institutes of Health and added to $33 million tax dollars for the NIH study. But that's only half the story. As NIH was ginning up a study helpful to the alcohol industry, it was also killing research that could be detrimental, like Dr. Michael Siegel's studies on alcohol marketing and underage drinking.
We knew that we were called in specifically because they weren't happy with this line of research.
Dr. Siegel and a colleague had just finished a study critical of alcohol marketing when they had a shocking encounter with Dr. George Koob, director of the NIH Institute of Alcohol Abuse.
The director essentially called us into his office to tell us that he would not be funding this research anymore. We might as well not submit a grant. We tried to make the scientific argument explaining why this was very important research. And he basically spouted off what I would consider to be alcohol industry talking points. And then finally, he just turned to us and he said, I don't care. He said, it doesn't matter to me.
When he said that, and you're there trying to make a scientific presentation, what were you thinking?
Well, first of all, I was so shocked to hear that language and that attitude that, I couldn't believe I was talking to the director of our National Alcohol Institute that's supposed to study alcohol. And that was just shocking to me. And in fact, after the meeting, my colleague and I, we went down to the cafeteria below the institute and we kind of asked each other, did he actually just say that?
They hatched the idea to file a Freedom of Information Act request to see if internal government emails would explain Dr. Koob's allegedly hostile attitude.
Did you get any documents that shed light on it?
So we did. It turns out that, the proverbial smoking gun was there in the documents that we received.
It was an email Dr. Koob sent to an alcohol industry representative. Sam, for the record, this will not happen again. I will not be funding this kind of work under my tenure.
Essentially, the Alcohol Institute was making a promise to the alcohol industry that they don't have to worry, this research won't be done again. They won't be funding any research on alcohol marketing. And so that really, it kind of completed the circle, completed the picture for us of really what was going on there.
Dr. Koob declined our interview request, but has said he simply meant he wouldn't fund bad science. The researchers, Dr. Muckamal and Crystal, also declined our interview requests, as did the head of NIH, Dr. Francis Collins, and Deputy Director Michael Lauer. Alcohol industry groups involved wouldn't agree to interviews either, but we did sit down with Sarah Longwell of the American Beverage Institute, a trade association.
Looks like government researchers came to them and said, if you give us a lot of money, we'll kick in some taxpayer money and come out with a study that will probably benefit you.
It is clear that this was a problem with the way that the government went about pursuing funding for the research. This was not a problem on the industry side. It was absolutely with the government and the way that they violated their own guidelines around solicitation.
The worst part, she says, is the bad behavior tainted a study on moderate drinking that really needs to be done. As we were reporting the story, NIH finished the investigation of its controversial research project, concluding it had major flaws. Early and frequent engagement with industry representatives calls into question the impartiality of the process, and competitive advantage and funding were unfairly steered to Dr. Muckamal. Years in the making, the study has now been halted for good. In the aftermath, a giant bureaucratic hangover and questions as to why no public action has been taken against researchers and government officials involved.
I think it shows that all too often we have some officials within the National Institutes of Health who are willing to cut ethical corners and engage in unacceptable conduct. It reflects perhaps a culture from the highest levels of the NIH that allows this type of unethical conduct to flourish.
The government estimates it spent $4 million of your tax dollars on the costs of the canceled alcohol study. Ahead on Full Measure, another question of biased science after a giant verdict involving the weed killer Roundup. In a landmark decision, a jury found the chemical company Monsanto responsible for a man's terminal cancer. The case focused on a popular weed killer used by millions of Americans, but Monsanto's epic loss may have been sealed by inside documents exposing a disturbing use of slanted science. Lisa Fletcher has the story.
Environmental groups are applauding the landmark ruling.
This morning, fallout from a monumental verdict.
I don't think anybody in their wildest dreams thought that we would get such a potentially world-changing verdict.
Attorney Timothy Litzenberg represented Dwayne Lee Johnson, a former school groundskeeper who routinely used Roundup, the popular weed killer you find at stores, on farms, and in homes all over the country. Johnson is dying of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Lawyers and the landmark case put the blame on Monsanto, saying Roundup's active ingredient, glyphosate, caused his cancer.
Did you find by clear and convincing evidence that Monsanto acted with malice or oppression in the conduct upon which you base your finding of liability in favor of Mr. Johnson? Answer, yes.
The jury awarded $289 million to Johnson, saying Monsanto failed to warn the public about the risks of glyphosate. Months later, the judge upheld the decision, but reduced some of the damages, lowering the total to $78 million. Monsanto told Full Measure, the verdict does not change the fact that more than 800 scientific studies and reviews support the fact that glyphosate is safe for use. Some 5,000 plaintiffs are now suing Monsanto, alleging exposure to Roundup caused them or their loved ones to develop cancer.
I think there's plenty of evidence to convince juries all over the country, so we'll keep doing it.
Key to the case against Monsanto was testimony that the company polluted the science. As part of the discovery phase of Johnson's trial, Monsanto turned over company correspondence, putting millions of internal emails and texts in public view.
When I understood there was litigation documents, I thought this is a trove, a treasure chest of information that the public should know about. They should know about what was behind the scenes in shaping the scientific viewpoint about glyphosate or Roundup.
Tufts University professor Sheldon Krimsky has been studying scientific ethics for 30 years. He sifted through the documents and published a paper with his findings.
Was there one thing that you saw that bothered you perhaps the most?
As a matter of doing business, believed it had the right to write articles and put other people's name on the articles.
Otherwise known as ghostwriting. A memo dated August 4, 2015. A Monsanto scientist summarized his work with the words, "Ghost wrote cancer review paper." A year later, an email from a different Monsanto scientist discussed who should be the ultimate author of 2 scientific papers to which he contributed but was not listed as author. Monsanto told Full Measure any allegation of ghostwriting is false. Though in its email, Monsanto specifically cites only one article, a review of glyphosate published in the journal Regulatory Toxicology and Pharmacology in 2000, saying that paper followed all standards and was not ghostwritten. The company did not address other examples cited in Krimsky's paper.
Monsanto has a lot of scientists under their thumb. They have certain go-to professors, academics that they will rely upon to counter the real science or any sort of anything against Monsanto.
But the question of real science has become something of an international debate. In 2015, the World Health Organization's independent cancer research body, the IARC, classified glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen. That agency's research came under question in Congress from House Science Committee Chairman Lamar Smith.
There appear to be serious problems with the science underlying IARC's assessment of glyphosate. The news media recently revealed evidence of data deletion and manipulation of draft assessments before final publication.
As recently as September, a statement from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Pesticides stated, Roundup is not dangerous to humans despite continued public debate about its safety. Litzenberg questions the corporate connection.
Drug companies are often cozy with the FDA. Monsanto and the EPA is in a whole nother league. It's incredible.
In 2017, California Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu asked the EPA to address allegations that an EPA employee may have colluded with Monsanto to conduct a biased review of glyphosate. The EPA's Inspector General responded, asking the Office of Investigations to conduct an inquiry. More than a year later, no findings have been released.
Should the EPA be held to account for these cozy relationships and the potential damage it does?
These companies have had their foot in the door for a long, long time, and they developed these relationships over many years. Yeah, I'm not sure what the solution is, except a big change at the political level.
Monsanto is now owned by Bayer, and it denies improper action with officials, saying its interactions with the agency are, quote, routine, transparent, and fully compliant with the law.
It's discouraging because we've done a lot of reporting on science that turns out to be less than scientific.
Yeah, well, there are allegations of bias and influence on both sides. So the fact is, it's hard to get at the facts when you're talking about big business, and it's even harder to rely on claims of science.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. Here's what's coming up next on Full Measure.
If you've ever wondered where those roads you're driving on or those runways you land on really come from, it might be here at Pitch Lake in a country you probably wouldn't suspect.
On assignment, we sometimes find out about remarkable things we never knew existed. That's what happened to Scott Thuman and crew on a recent trip to Trinidad and Tobago. They came across an amazing natural wonder that you may have encountered yourself without even knowing it.
At first glance, you're not really sure what you're even seeing. It looks like an unfinished parking lot, about 100 acres and mostly barren, minus a stray dog and the occasional tour group. Though what we're walking on, locals boast, is the 8th wonder of the world. Called Pitch Lake, this semi-hardened pool of asphalt is the largest of its kind on the planet.
It's still a natural wonder because nowhere in the world they will find pitch in a solid state. And nowhere other way in the world they could find a pitch lake that you could walk on it and show people some of the artifacts.
The bits that bubble up from beneath are fascinating, from trees dating back thousands of years to a giant sloth's rib and a mastodon's tooth. But the tar, emitting gas you can actually light on fire, and texture like memory foam, is the real spectacle here. Well, there's kind of a spongy feel to the surface when you're walking on it. Only a few inches down is where you realize how everything is basically liquid with a pungent, noticeable odor. In 1595, natives showed British explorer Sir Walter Raleigh Pitch Lake while on his search for El Dorado, the city of gold. Using this sticky substance to caulk leaks on his ship, the moment was immortalized later on a postage stamp. The fame was followed by industry. But they'll take this, they'll heat this up.
This will boil down, and as they boil it for 18 hours and it comes to a molten substance, then it is strained to extract things like this.
So then they're getting out these pieces of wood like this,
yes,
like bits of tree, and brought up as fast as they can churn it out. Over the years, some 10 million tons. China, Germany, and Brazil, top customers. How much money do they make every year out of selling?
That's a good question. I can't really answer that one.
It's likely a lot. The pitch is about 250 feet deep and seems almost endless. It's been spread from the Lincoln Tunnel to LaGuardia's tarmac, some of Washington, D.C.'s first roads, and the one leading to London's Buckingham Palace. Tell me what you think of this place.
It's fantastic. I have come here 4 times. The place is so calm, the water is nice.
So we think it's fascinating that some of this ends up in Washington.
It is like a blessing that we can bless other countries with our natural resources that we have right here in Trinidad.
Well, now some of the roads right leading up to this could use it, couldn't they?
Yeah. Oh gosh, don't talk about it. Yeah. Plenty.
Why are you sending it all to us? You need it on the road right there.
Yeah. They're working lights.
Yeah.
They're hardly worried. This obscure, lesser-known spot on the map won't dry up anytime soon. Scientists say it should keep on paving the world's highways for another 400 years. For Full Measure, I'm Scott Thuman in Trinidad.
Looking for gold and finding something maybe almost as valuable. We're back with a look at what's ahead next week, right after this. Next week on Full Measure, long questioned links between vaccines and autism was a top government medical expert silenced.
He was an expert witness for the United States government in the omnibus autism proceeding, and he has come forward and explained how he told the United States government that vaccines can cause autism in a certain subset of children, and the United States government suppressed his true opinions.
One of the largest medical debates of our time on the next Full Measure. Until then, that's all for this week. We hope you'll visit us on social media. Thanks for watching.